Howdy y'all, my name is Yahya Khan, and for my psychology and film assignment, we will be looking at Vinland Saga, specifically the character of Thorfinn from a psychoanalytic perspective. We're going to analyze the plot, make a fictional diagnosis, and hopefully propose a treatment plan. Now, I do have words written across the slides, but I think it would be awesome if you could have your sound on just to enhance the overall experience. So, setting the stage, Vinland Saga is a piece of historical fiction. It dates back to the early 11th century, so think of 1000 AD, and it shows the Viking lifestyle, trade, exploration, and unfortunately, the bloodshed of war across Europe. So our character Thorfinn, the main character and protagonist of the show, witnessed the assassination of his father at just 6 years old. This turning point set him on a quest of vengeance to become a warrior so that he could defeat Askeladd, the leader of the Viking group who murdered his father. And so the show takes a time jump of nearly 11 years that Thorfinn spends traveling with Askeladd's crew. They fight in wars across Europe and he kills many on the battlefield. But unfortunately, Thorfinn was never able to satisfy his lust for revenge because Askeladd lost his life in battle and he himself was arrested by the Danish prince and sold into slavery. These events are crucial because they set the events of the second arc, the farmland arc, as well as the path to acceptance and recovery for our protagonist. Now, the diagnosis that I want to extract from his character is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, PTSD is defined by the DSM-5 diagnostic criteria as a trauma and stress-related disorder that develop following exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or acts of sexual violence. Now, when we think of PTSD, we think of soldiers coming back from war, someone who got into a car accident, or just anyone who's gone through something traumatic, as the name suggests. And so this often causes negative alterations in their cognitive ability, and they just have a difficulty in forgetting the traumatic event that they go through, this avoidance. And so in terms of the cultural context of Vinland Saga, this show took place 1,000 years ago, so there was no concept of mental health, and so these conditions were never actually diagnosed, but rather kind of the opposite. As I mentioned in the quote at the bottom, these veterans often saw PTSD as a illness, this weakness that they have inside of them that they must eliminate because it's a scar that you cannot see, so a scar you cannot feel. That was their logic. And since there was no recognition of mental disorder, there was no actual form of treatment, so the most logical solution that people had was some form of talk therapy, even though it wasn't completely effective. So what evidence do I have that Thorfinn actually has PTSD? Well, in the second arc of the story, the farmland arc, his character goes through a complete flip. Instead of being this violent, angry kid, he's now quiet and empty because he has no hatred, he has nothing in his heart. And so the two symptoms that I want to elaborate on based on the DSM-5 criteria is first, the negative alterations in cognition and mood. This is specifically when one of the farmhands, they cut Thorfinn and threaten him with a sword to kill him. And Thorfinn says in a state of hopelessness that not a single good thing has happened to me in my entire life. Secondly is the presence of one of the following intrusion symptoms associated with the traumatic event, which in this case are the vivid nightmares that he has nearly every night of people dying. He relives the battlefield and it's just terrible. However, one symptom he does not have is he's not reckless, nor is he self-destructive, nor is he irritable. In fact, he's quite the opposite due to how empty and hopelessness she shows. Now, what is my treatment plan? Now, I want to take inspiration from the show and also propose my own plan based off what I've learned in the course lecture. And in the show, Thorfinn accepts his past actions and creates a new goal for himself to find peace, not make war. So he does this by both talk therapy and unconscious introspection. What I mean by that is, while he's in one of his dreams, he meets Askeladd again, who tells him to become a true warrior. So I want to propose a similar treatment plan under the basis of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. I think it's the best method to both help Thorfinn process his trauma and tackle the nightmares he's suffering from. As always, there are concerns and flaws to my method because of the fact that we are going to be re-exposing himself to this trauma. If it's not done gradually, it could leave him in an even more distressed state and increase his internal trauma. And there are also the social barriers that I've discussed, such as the stigma of mental health being a weakness rather than an actual diagnosis to consider. And also Thorfinn being a slave means that he won't have as much access to professional therapists. Now let's wrap everything up. Vinland Saga, Thorfinn, PTSD, and look at it from a broader perspective. Now I think the show did a fabulous job at showing what PTSD would look like without actually saying that Thorfinn has PTSD through the conditions and symptoms that he suffers from. It's really realistic and also accurate, because we've heard stories of soldiers coming home from war and they have to endure a second battle that's honestly even worse than what the battlefield is, because it's a scar that you cannot heal. You cannot wrap it with a bandage, nor can you perform surgery on it. And so I think in this aspect, Vinland Saga doesn't force us to feel sorry for Thorfinn, but we go out of our way to empathize with his condition and the struggle that he faces, even though the society he lives in would not be able to recognize this because of the norms, the stigma, and just lack of knowledge in general. And so with that, I want to thank all of you guys for making it this far to the video. I have put all the citations from the articles I have used in the top left. And with that, I want to thank you for sticking to my presentation, and have a great day.